Everyone loves the dividend snowball idea until they actually do the math. Social media charts show passive income growing exponentially. You think, great, I'll invest $5,000 to cover my rent. But after a quarter, your balance buys only lukewarm coffee. Ugh. Most quit, realizing $1,000 monthly income needs a terrifyingly large capital. But here's the good news. The math is stubborn, but solvable. Today, I'll show you how much money you need for a livable dividend paycheck. Why chasing high yields often leads to losing everything. And how to build a six-figure income engine without a six-figure salary. Before we dive into numbers, let's be clear. I am not a financial advisor, just a guy obsessed with wealth mechanics. I read the boring reports so you don't have to. If you appreciate honest math over hype, do me a favor and subscribe. It's the best return on investment you'll get for $0. Now, the dream is specifically $1,000 a month. That's the magic number, covering groceries or a car payment. Or a decent chunk of rent. It changes your life. But in the dividend world, nobody quotes monthly income. They quote annual yields. So, step one is translating your dream. Translate your dream into the market's language. $1,000 a month is $12,000 a year. That is our target. $12,000 in pure, cold, hard cash. Deposited into your account every single year. Let's start with the common belief. When I first looked into this, I assumed I'd need $1 million. So, that's just the number that floats around in our heads. We think you have to be rich to get richer. While partially true, the capital you need acts like a lever. It moves drastically based on one variable: dividend yield. The problem is most new investors don't understand how that lever works. They assume all stocks pay dividends, or that all dividends are equal. They look at a tech stock soaring 20% a year. And assume it's also paying them income. Usually, it is not. The market is split into growers and payers. If you want income, you have to buy pairs. The price of admission for that $12,000 annual paycheck? It's dictated entirely by the yield percentage of assets you choose. Here is the formula, the only one you need today. Take your target annual income, $12,000. No. Divided by the dividend yield. That's it. Income divided by yield equals required capital.
9. That is per selection power. If you use any dividend calculator, this is what they're doing.
So, let's run a scenario for a standard, conservative dividend portfolio. A realistic, safe yield for quality stocks is usually 3–4%. Let's be optimistic and say 4%. You take $12,000 divided by 0.04. The number staring back at you is $300,000. That is the reality check. To get $1,000 a month at 4% yield, you need $300,000 invested. If you want to be safer, targeting 3% yield, the number jumps to $400,000. Suddenly, that $5,000 deposit feels very small. The reason this math hurts is psychological. We are wired to look at the stock price, not the yield mechanics. When we see a share price of $100, we think, I can afford that. But we forget, the share price has almost nothing to do with income. A stock costing $100 might pay $1 a year in dividends. Another stock costing $50 might pay $2. We fixate on accumulating shares rather than accumulating yield. We tell ourselves, if we just keep buying, income will magically appear. But the math doesn't care about your effort. It only cares about the ratio. If you're building a portfolio with 1% yield, you're signing up for a marathon. The finish line is over $1 million away. We ignore the denominator because confronting capital requirements is painful. It's easier to dream about income than stare at the six-figure price tag. So, what's the protocol here? Stop looking at monthly dividend payouts in your app. Start looking at your total portfolio value relative to your $300,000 target. You need to accept $300,000 is the baseline for a secure $1,000 monthly income. Does that mean you should give up if you only have $10,000? No, it means you need to adjust your time frame. You're not building an income stream next week. You are building a machine that costs $300,000. Your job right now isn't to live off the dividends. Wrong. Your job is to build the machine. Once you accept the target is $250,000 or more.
You stop making desperate trades to squeeze pennies from bad stocks.
And start focusing on aggressive contribution, the only thing that matters early on.
Now, the clever part of your brain is whispering a dangerous idea.
You're looking at that $300,000 number and thinking, why settle for 4%? I see stocks paying 8, 9, maybe 10%. If I buy those, I only need half the money.
That is the trapdoor.
If you think saving $300,000 is hard, wait until you see how fast you can lose $50,000 chasing a 10% yield. A frantic cartoon chase soundscape features rapid cartoonish footsteps and the rhythmic rustling of paper banknotes. Let's talk about yield chasing. It's the financial equivalent of eating gas station sushi. It looks cheap, accessible, but the after effects are rarely pleasant.
You pull up a stock screener and sort by highest yield.
You see names you might not recognize, or fading giants offering 9 to 10% dividends. You do the math. $12,000 divided by 10% is only $120,000. Suddenly, the goal line moved way closer.
You think you've outsmarted the process.
Why save $300,000 when you can get the same income for $120,000? It feels like finding a shortcut in a video game. But in the market, yield is practically a measure of risk. If a company pays 10% to hold its stock, the market screams something's wrong. The business is usually distressed, or they're about to cut that dividend. Leaving you holding a bag of worthless shares. Here's the math of a yield trap. A dividend yield is simply the annual payout divided by the stock price. If a stock pays $1 and costs $20, the yield is 5%. But what happens if the company gets into trouble and the stock price crashes to $10? The math says $1 divided by $10 is now a 10% yield. The yield doubled, but only because your principal got cut in half. This is what you see on the screen, a juicy 10% number. You don't see the carnage that created it. Often, these companies pay out more cash than they actually earn. They're borrowing money or selling assets just to keep the dividend alive. Eventually, the math breaks. They cut the dividend to zero. Now you have a stock that pays nothing. And because the dividend is gone, the share price crashes even further. You tried to save capital by chasing yield and lost the capital you started with. The psychology here is something I call income blindness. We get so fixated on the cash flow that we ignore the asset value.
It's like buying a rental property that's on fire because the tenant pays double rent. Sure, the check clears this month, but the house is burning down.
We rationalize it, saying, "I'm in it for the long haul, I don't care about the stock price." But you should. If the stock price goes to zero, the dividend goes to zero. High yields trick our brains because we process the immediate reward.
The dividend check, much more vividly than the abstract risk of capital loss.
We feel smart for getting that high percentage. It flatters our ego. We think we found an opportunity Wall Street missed. But Wall Street rarely misses anything.
Ajiti gagit dat ye bapat banedia. Matanchel kanek hedi lingu se beniri sapnede.
You're not betting against the market. You're usually betting against math.
Oh, what is the safe zone? Where should you actually be looking?
Based on historical data, the sweet spot is generally between 3 and 5%. This is where you find mature, profitable, growing, but not distressed companies. Companies like this usually raise their dividends, not just pay them. This is crucial. You want to raise every year to beat inflation. If you stick to this 3 to 5% range, you're back to needing that $250,000 to $400,000 portfolio.
I know it hurts to go back to the big number.
But a $300,000 portfolio yielding 4% that grows every year is infinitely better than a $100,000 portfolio yielding 10% that implodes. The protocol is strict. Filter out anything with a yield that looks too good to be true. If it's double the market average, it's double the trouble. Stick to the boring middle. Now, the index fund purists are screaming at their screens right now. They're saying, "Alex, just buy the S&P 500, buy the whole market and chill." And usually, I agree with them. Index funds are the best way to build wealth for 99% of people. But if your goal is $1,000 of cash flow hitting your checking account every month without selling shares, the S&P 500 is actually terrible at that job. The math on this is going to shock you. The S&P 500 is amazing for growth, including companies like Nvidia, Amazon, and Google. Remember, building wealth requires patience and strategic action. Trust the process, automate your investments, and focus on your long-term